What is church? You know, as I've been locked up in this pandemic, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. Now, the truth is I'm a pastor and a bit of a dork, so my mind naturally goes there, but I think it is a good thing to think about. What is church? You know, many of my friends will gather together at a coffee shop and they'll say, oh, this is church. Other people I know would refer to that white building down the street and say, oh, that's church. Some people I know would go for a walk in the woods and they say, oh, for me, that's church. Many of the other pastors I know, if you were to ask them, 6 months ago, can you go to church online? Many of them would have said no. And yet today they find themselves saying, hey, come to church online. So what is church? Jesus went to church. He would go and gather together with other believers. He would worship God, and then he would leave church, go out into the world, and say, hey, come follow me. And if people would follow him, he would lead them back to church. That's how the disciples became the disciples. They followed Jesus. They became disciples. And then they went out into the world and they planted churches, other locations where people could gather together. You see, I think that's a really important thing to realize is that church is about gathering. Can you gather online? Sure you can. Sure you can. People gathering together. That's what church is. Gathering together to worship God. Can you do that online? Absolutely. But there's something more to it. You see, what do you do when you gather together? These early believers, they would gather together. The idea, again, is that they would lay themselves down and for a moment put all of the rest of life on hold simply to lift up the God that they believe in. They would do that through things like corporate prayer. They would do that through things like singing. Nowadays, we wonder, can you even sing? There's been all kinds of articles online, like the least safe thing you can have is a church choir singing. So is it church without a choir? Another thing that churches do and participate in, or people participate in that becomes church would be a communion, coming to table fellowship. It's this idea of us gathering together to celebrate Jesus' body broken for us, his blood shed for us. Jesus said on the last night that he was with his disciples before he went to the cross, he said, when you gather together in the future and participate in this, would you remember me? So we corporately gather together to remember Jesus and his sacrifice, his body broken, his blood shed for the forgiveness of our sins. Another thing we do when we gather oftentimes is we participate in baptisms. This is believers, people that have said, oh, wait a minute, I've accepted Christ inwardly. I know that I'm a follower of Christ. Now they want to publicly declare it. So they stand up and they say, I am a follower of Christ. And they're baptized. These are the types of things that we do as we gather together in corporate worship. So is what we're doing as we gather online these days during COVID, is it church? Yeah, I think it can be. At least it's the best we can have today. But very soon an opportunity is coming for us to physically gather together again. The country is loosening up and people are going to start going back to church. And I want to encourage you to be one of those participants, to be a part of it. In my next video, one of the things I want to talk about is it safe? And we'll wrestle through that idea. But the reality is the opportunity is coming for you to go back to church. You should be there. My name is Eric, and I am the 5-Minute Pastor.